All right.
Hello and welcome to the Braving Business Podcast. Today we are honored by having Erez Avramov, who is a business strategist, a keynote speaker, a leadership coach, a resiliency expert, and the founder of Life Rebuilder Academy. Born in Israel, Tal's homeland, he has also served in the elite Commando unit of the Israeli Air Force before immigrating to Canada. Erez has become an internationally recognized expert on the subject of resiliency and earned his nickname as the man who refuses to die by going through 3 near-death experiences in his life, as well as an elective amputation of his right leg below the knee. We're going to get into that. A heart attack, which we'll definitely get into as well, and a career transformation. He believes that when we arrive at our darkest night of the soul, it has the potential to actually be our greatest gift. Erez, it's an honor to have you on the Braving Business Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, PJ, and thank you, Tal. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Erez, it's great to have you with us, and I'm honored to have you share your story, which is so remarkable, almost unfathomably remarkable. So why don't we start with you giving us a little bit of the background of what led you to become known as the man who refuses to die?
That's a great opening question. And I would say, the nickname was given to me. Definitely we'll dive into the details of why. But just a little bit of background, born and raised in Israel, was always an adventurer by heart, loved to do many different outdoor activities and adventures all over the place from a very young age. And as you know, Tal, for us in Israel, we have to serve in the military. It's a compulsory service, 3 years for men, 2 years for women. And I was kind of brought up with the intent of, if you are going to serve, you might as well do the best you can and aim for the best military service that you can aspire to. And for me, it was actually aiming towards, there are like 3 top elite units in the Israeli military. It's like the Navy SEALs and the Green Berets and kind of all of those things in the US, SAS in England, things like that. In Israel, we have the same structure, of course. So a lot of the early stages of my youth were kind of oriented towards, okay, how am I going to make it into that specific unit? And that's a journey on its own. If you want, we can dive into that, or we can continue.
Yeah,
sorry,
please.
PJ, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so did you have was there a specific unit that you really wanted to be a part of when you were growing up?
Yes, I actually really wanted to be in search and rescue. That was when I was 13, I was introduced to the outdoor community of Israel. A lot of veterans from search and rescue, because I was doing rock climbing, rappelling, canyoneering, caving, all of those activities that I love. And these were the guys who actually participated in them in Israel and were kind of my mentors. So by the age of 16, I was actually almost selected to be part of search and rescue. But in Israel, you go through a very dedicated screening process of almost 2 years. And I was just pulled into the Israeli Air Force on the more Commando side of things, you can call it. And the screening process, I didn't know to which unit I was actually screened for, because that wasn't something they share with you. So I ended up, instead of search and rescue, actually at the front line as a combat soldier.
Wow. Erez, I bet you're familiar with the book Startup Nation by Dan Senor. It's a book about the culture in Israel that starts in the military. What can you share about what that culture taught you about speaking your mind, being accountable?
Yeah, beautiful question. So I would start with that. Speaking your mind is not very encouraged. I actually ended up in military jail once for speaking my mind too much. Funny thing, when you question the prime minister, they don't like it. So, but that aside, I think the culture, especially in military, allows men, and I see the same with women, to mature and grow in a pace that I haven't seen in any other place. And one of the big reasons for that is that you are being extracted from your home environment and you're being thrown into something that you cannot be prepared for. Doesn't matter how much you think you're prepared for or anything. It's just a total universe, different universe out there. And the process is so ingenious in how they do it in military to take you from an 18-year-old and build you up to whatever the outcome is. You know, it could be an administrative position, or it could be, you know, like a war machine, like I was trained to be. It's a design process. So every step of the way builds up a certain part. First of all, it breaks you down, and then it builds you up. So the culture, I think, to answer your question, is embedded in those particular experiences. And I find that at least my experience with a very, very elite unit, it was kind of almost the Navy SEALs of the skies. The relationships that were built throughout the process, nothing I've ever experienced in my life. The friendships, the trust, the ability to blindly trust your life in someone else's hands, but blindly. This is not, you think in the back of your mind, maybe they're going to step up or not. This is unquestionable, really experiences that I haven't been exposed to in any other realm outside of that level of military service.
Wow. I could totally see how that would apply in the future for any kind of business endeavor that you have, or any kind of goal achievement that you set forth, because having that blindness of trust of those around you, whether it's the people around you or just yourself, of your own capabilities and your own talents. I think that's what allows you to climb that mountain, to put that flag in the peak. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, very much so. And as we know, trust is everything. As humans, we don't trust. It's kind of the default is I don't trust. How do you pass that barrier? And not necessarily you have to get to that blindless trust position, but it is this transference of trust and enabling someone to trust you and you to trust them. Otherwise, we're just living in an inauthentic environment that, you know, you can still achieve things, but I find them to be very diluted and boring, to be honest.
So let's talk about trust, because I think trust is, as I've come to experience in my own journey, trust is a big factor in perseverance. Being able to return to trust, especially if your trust has been compromised for one reason or another, is a huge, it's a big challenge, and it requires a lot of maturity. Can you tell me about how you transferred some of the lessons you learned in the military to your career?
Yes, I think maybe an easy entry point to this would be, you know, when I was in the military, you do what you have to do. You don't have a choice. You know, we started 1,500 guys. We ended up through the selection process. 26 of us were selected. 13 of us finished operation training, and then we become operative soldiers and do what we needed to do. So that entire process, I would say, is almost outside of your realm of choices. Either you want to finish it or you don't. And they make everything possible for you not to finish it. So there's a different tenacity, a different mindset. It is very extreme. It is very unhealthy in retrospect to build a young man to operate in that type of environment, because it is very one-sided. It's all or nothing. It's black and white. There is no room for failure. It doesn't exist in that realm. You fail, you're out. That is it, right? It's not an accommodating environment. Oh, okay, let's learn from this and move on. No, you fucked up, you're out, right? So it's a very extreme process. So during the military service, I would say I wasn't aware of what I was learning and who I was becoming, because I'm a rebel by heart, by nature. The military environment was never a great environment for me. I think this is what enabled me to thrive through my military service, was to be in a very elite unit. This is almost a a bubble outside the military. You know, we wore civilian clothes and we had access to great stuff because it's the Air Force. And it wasn't like hardcore, you know, Marine Corps type of military service that some people are aware of. It's a very, very different lifestyle. But transitioning out of military service, I think I brought into my life this idea of I can do whatever I want. I'm almost the factor of fear is extracted out of you, because in order to perform the way they want you to perform, you cannot be afraid of anything. You actually, they build up your ego to such a crazy level where you think you're invincible and you can do whatever is needed. And, you know, there's nothing in this world that you cannot do, right? And that's the level they want you to be at in order to perform to that degree of execution as a soldier. Taking that into civilian life makes it very, very difficult to interact in a normal life, because you're trying to push the envelope with everything that you do. And that was a journey that wasn't easy for me. I didn't understand that I am operating from a place that is a little bit disconnected from who I am versus what I can do externally. So it's almost like erase the machine and erase the person. And there was a conflict for several years of who's who.
There's a, not to get geeky, but there's a science fiction book by an author by the name of John Stakely, I believe, called Armor. And it's all about being in impossible military circumstances. And he calls himself the machine. That is his mental armor, so to speak, to enable him, like to transpose his own personality to a persona so that he can go do what he needs to do, forget his humanity and be the machine and survive. And so it's really interesting. I've got a couple of things out of this so far. A, you're my own personal John Wick. If I'm ever in a dark alley, I want you by my side, please. Actually in front of me. That'd be great. And then secondly, so this all sounds like it kind of folds into this, your own persona of being known as the man who refuses to die. Also another movie reference, Sisu, just came out this year about the Finnish guy in World War II. Extremely violent, but very cool. He also refused to die. So from what I'm getting, that boiling that down, this mentality, this machine mentality is really the bedrock of what allows you to go forward, right? Because if you're not tethered by fear and failure is not an option, then you can go full bore for whatever you want. Is that kind of how it works for you?
It is how it works, but it's the opposite of how you should do life, right?
Yes.
I think experiencing life through this almost call it the machine lens allows you to achieve a lot on the exterior side of things, right? Like achieve goals, be persistent, you know, kind of grit and willpower and motivation and all those things that everybody is so enamored by these days, as if we're trying to, you know, create this new persona that has to be, you know, that type of machine in order to succeed in life. I actually found, and we'll go through the process of how I took off the shield to become a person, and then life started to really work for me. I think that approach isolates you from real day-to-day life, because we engage with people. You know, I always say, and there's a saying in the, you know, cognitive behavior world of, we are in the business of human to human. There is no business relationship. There is no, you know, personal, just I'm a father, I'm a spouse, I'm whatever. It's human to human. And in order to interact on that level, if you have a shield that you operate behind, it's always going to be very, very on the surface. So you may see exterior success, but inside there's a big disconnect, usually.
So, Erez, that's a really interesting point, and I think it speaks particularly to what happens to individuals who do experience a lot of success by being machine-like, and the challenge when facing obstacles, unanticipated obstacles, to shed the machine persona, become human, become vulnerable, present themselves as imperfect, flawed to their colleagues, their subordinates, their clients, their investors. Talk about the challenge that represents for a lot of high achieving people who are attracted to entrepreneurship and business and leadership because of the bigger than, stronger than persona that many of us have come to associate with the titans of industry.
What a beautiful question there, Tal. You know, again, I think it's more to do with knowing who you are and accepting the journey within versus the journey without. Because for many, especially if we look at high achievers, you know, in the business arena in particular, it's also applicable, you know, to sports, politics, a lot of areas that demand a certain persona to kind of lead the way. There is I feel, at least from my end, understanding my little world and how I operate within it, it's just a shift of perspective of what is actually needed to feel successful with yourself. And success is a very personal definition. Nobody has a, you know, one way or another. It's not a one size fits all. But I think that when you talk about entrepreneurs that have bought into the idea that they need to become the machine in order to succeed, and don't get me wrong, a lot of achievements are enabled because of that approach, but you approach the end result very dissatisfied, sometimes depressed, unhappy, broken, unhealthy. You've burned so many bridges along the way with people, with family, with business colleagues, because the price that you thought would give you that happiness and that beautiful place, you thought it was worth it. And I don't know about you, but, you know, I work with clients who have achieved, you know, multi-billion-dollar success. And that empty place, if it hasn't been addressed, no money in the world can buy it.
So true. So true. But also, I think it's very interesting in that, you know, the vulnerability that Tal, you mentioned, that openness of being human. No one gets power alone, right? You have to have people who are your fans. You have to have people who are willing to support you. And I think that's just a great comment about, if you're too focused and too machine-like and you're burning your bridges along the way, you don't have anyone to celebrate with, really. Right. And so I think that for you to really achieve success, you need other people. You need to be connected. That's the only way really to do it.
Yeah, I really do believe you need both. It's this, you know, it's not that there's a balance between them. I don't believe in balance on any level in life. It's just, you know, there are specific areas that we need to focus more on as the cycle of life continues, and we have to address it that way. But I find that a good relationship with those two personalities and abilities is what is required. And I can tell you that it took me years and 3 near-death experiences, which were, you know, on the surface of it, terrible, in order to learn these lessons. Because when I came into those experiences, I didn't understand the depth that this journey actually calls you to participate in. I thought it was still external. I thought it was still, you know, I can power my way through, you know, I can put the shield of the Commando guy and I can just make it happen. And every time it just shattered in my face and took me down to, you know, the depths of dark nights and very difficult situations.
And you talked about that. So I do want to dive into those 3 near-death experiences and what they taught you collectively and individually about resilience. But maybe for starters, the process of beginning to recognize that you've changed and that you are not the person you were and are able to look at things more broadly. That is difficult for a lot of people. It tends to happen later in life almost. I mean, I'll be 50 this year, and I would say that over the last few years, I've become more human. I was probably living like a machine for most of my life, to my own detriment, and on many levels to the benefit of myself and my investors and my colleagues. How do you determine that, it is time to reassess, that no matter how much success maybe you had or how many accolades you've won, that you are not living your best life. You're not being the best version of yourself.
Yeah, the big question, right? And I think you know it. I think you know when you're dissatisfied. I think you know when you're disconnected. I think you know when you're on autopilot. You may have exterior success to the yin yangs, right? I mean, amazing companies, exits, the cars, the yachts, the houses, I don't know, whatever you associate with success. But inside as a person, man, you know it. There is just this riff inside of you that doesn't matter what you try to do, you are not fulfilled. And I'm not talking about happiness. Happiness is such a watered down approach to what I call contentment. Life is not about being happy. Happiness is an emotion. You can be happy for 1 minute and then somebody cuts you on the road and you give them the finger and now you're angry. So it's not about sustaining happiness, but I think inside as we...
That happens a lot more in Tel Aviv than it does in Toronto, I'm going to assume.
Not in Vancouver too. It's very rare.
I don't know. Come
Right.
on to Chicago.
Yeah. Or New York.
Or New York. Very true.
Yeah.
But I think that everyone that listens to this, if you're in a spot that you know there is more, you know that you are not fulfilled, you know that you may have pursued a very specific path that you thought will be fulfilling, but it's not really. That inner calling is in there. Unfortunately, at least, and I'm biased because this is my experience, I find that something really difficult and challenging has to happen in your life to really shift the trajectory of how you see yourself and the choices you are willing to make because of that. If you're in a comfort zone, it's a lot easier to stay there, even if it's not a great place. It's familiar, maybe it's easy, and you kind of are stuck in there.
Oh, been there.
Yeah. I think we all have, right? And then life hits you, right? Same has happened to me. And I moved, just to give a little kind of context for the listeners. So served in the military, then traveled the world. A lot of Israelis do that because we don't have our youth, right? 18, you finish high school, boom, you're in military. So you kind of have a chance to travel the world and experience different things there. And for me, one of the big shifts were that in 96, the Prime Minister of Israel was assassinated by a right-wing extremist. And I was in the Secret Service after my military service, and I was very, very close to the administration at the time. And I just saw the shift in the country. And unfortunately, these days, we just see how extreme that approach has become. And that really triggered me to ask the question, if I was to raise a family, where is it going to be? And that was my beginning of a journey to actually look for a different place. And to make a long story short, I was in Europe for a few years, in the States for a few years, and then chose Canada as home. I've been here now for almost 19 years. And that was from the perspective of enabling my family to have an environment, at least, that is different to what I grew up with. Not to say that Israel is not a great place. I am who I am because of it. I love the country. My siblings are there. My family is there. But the conditions, the environment that we put ourselves in is, as far as I'm concerned, the foundation for everything else that we will have in life.
So let's dive into those 3 near-death experiences. Why don't you take us through them one by one? And to the extent that you had lessons that they taught you about resilience or perseverance, we'd love for our listeners to hear them.
For sure. So here in Canada, I was my speciality, my kind of genius touch was in real estate. I was an entrepreneur in real estate. I wore any hat that the industry has to offer, from an investor, contractor, broker, manager, every single hat. It was all putting deals together and being very creative with the process, created multiple 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses around this industry, and felt at the time that this was kind of the journey, immigrant in Canada, establishing a new home and a new base and everything else. And it was all business. And of course, I was burnt out. My relationship at home was struggling, right? Realized after a while that we just didn't have the right foundation. That led to a divorce at that time. And I ended up as a single dad, 2 little girls, questioning, how did I get here, right? And that was really the entry point into just being curious about, like, what's going on? Well, who's who, who's what? And that started a journey that I really can't say how it all unfolded, but my huge first wake-up call was a near-death experience in a car accident with a fully loaded semi-truck. I was actually on my way up north, and I was about to meet actually a business mentor of mine. I always have mentors and coaches in my life. It's the only way I know how to grow and get away and see my blind spots. And a terrible snowstorm, black ice, lost control over the car, and just hit a semi-truck head-on collision. To survive that accident was a miracle. I was just broken into a billion pieces. Chances of survival were very, very low. But that is, I think, when the machine kicked in. It was all survival. And to be honest, I'm good at survival. It's my comfort zone, if I'm really honest, right? Like, I will put me in any condition, anywhere in the world, easy. It's not even a challenge, right? It's like, this is my home turf, right? I just came back now from 3 days, motorcycle trip solo in Washington State, and I sleep in beautiful places and I do my thing because it's where I feel alive, right? So that accident was very physical. It was just, I broke 27 bones in my like my sternum, my ribs, crushed my femur, my ankle, lungs collapsed, like multiple injuries. But as soon as the life-threatening piece was under control, the resiliency mechanism, which says, okay, this has happened, how do I deal with this, kicked in. And when it kicked in, it was all about, okay, how do I recover, right? How do I get my life back together? And I think that process for me is fascinating because it calls you to question every single thing that you think you know, that you think you understand, that you get confused by, and you are in this unknown territory. And I find it to be the most challenging place to be in, yet the most beautiful, transformative lessons are always embedded in the depth of that experience. And that was my first entry point to this entire journey.
Wow. Did you, just briefly on that, do you remember the accident?
I remember every single second of it. Everything from the losing control to the rescue teams with the jaws of life cutting the car and say there's no one there. There's no way we'll find someone alive there, and how they extracted me from there. And vividly, every single moment of it is embedded in me. Oh. So that experience also, because I was on the verge of moving on. Those near-death experiences, it's a very big subject. I'm not going to dive into it, but you're on the edge between life and death. And whatever death is for somebody that doesn't know or didn't experience the edge, it's very difficult to define because there are no words. We're very limited in how to interact with it. But anyways, you are there and you have to make a choice. Am I going to fight for my life, or am I going to give up and let go? And I totally understand today why people let go in many situations when it's too difficult, when they die from a specific disease that they were not capable to cope with well or interact with it in a way that they can actually heal versus let the disease take over, or whatever other circumstance in life. That's really the catalyst of this shift in almost I would use the word consciousness, because you have to dive into a different realm that most of us are just uncomfortable with. It's not a place we want to visit. It's a lot easier to just, do what we do. So there was an entry point that was triggered. I was in survival mode. I'm great at it. I took under control everything that I could have. So nutrition, I studied nutrition like a PhD degree. I studied neuroscience because I was depressed and suicidal, and I just didn't understand how my mind can betray me that much. So I studied why and how. I studied, spirituality, West approach, Eastern approaches, meditation, breathing techniques, you name it. I've experimented with it all just to understand how, in a situation like this, I can regain control, or what I thought was control. Because the physical recovery, as difficult as it was relatively easy compared to the mental toll that this accident took on me, and who I was and who I thought I was. Because here it is, the big commando guy that can do whatever, the machine, I'm now broken, and I couldn't father my kids. I couldn't be there for my wife. I couldn't be there for my business. I felt a complete failure, right? That's where the depression hit me, because I was in such a dark place. I couldn't find a way out of it. I thought, like, this is the end for me, right? How would I ever come back to anything? And
these are such powerful observations that you were making about your experience, and I want to draw from that to maybe give some insights to our listeners about what they can bring into their lives. I feel that my own experience, and a lot of listeners probably who are in business and have suffered setbacks, there's this experience of wondering how much more abuse or pain you can take. Failure is relentless. Oftentimes when one thing goes wrong, several things go wrong right behind that, and it often feels overwhelming, deeply personally embarrassing. You oftentimes are someone that has experienced a lot of success, and you've not really dealt with the challenges of perseverance and overcoming. What would you say are one or two really, really critical first steps that you've got to take if you're at that place where you're looking around you and it's just dark?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question for everyone to ask, whether you're successful or not being able to reach the success levels that you believe you deserve or you're after. And I think here comes a question of a belief system. I find that there are two paths in life, and nothing to do with religion or anything like that, but there is one path that says, if I put it on a little bit of a lighter kind of approach to it, is life happening to me or for me, right? Am I the victim of circumstances, or there is something there that is here to allow me to grow and evolve and do something better with my life? And I think that junction is where everything begins. That decision of how you're going to approach this struggle and challenge, be that in business, in health, in your relationships, whatever it is you are confronted with, if you choose the path of victimhood, why this has happened to me, what did I do to deserve this, this is not fair, blah, 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 they are at fault, all of those things, you've chosen a path. You've chosen the path of, life is just against me, right? And I can say that this is a very, very difficult, challenging path. I personally, with my limited experience and the people that I work with and the knowledge I've accumulated over the years, I haven't seen success stories when you approach life this way. It ends up usually very, very badly. And the other side of it is this belief system of what I today call curiosity. Like, this has happened. Wow. It's not like why this has happened. Oh my God, you're involved in the details and the causes and all of that. It's like, what's in this that I can actually learn and grow and transform with? And this is really the mechanism I think that I've developed over the years, and I really use as the engine of the coaching system that I have today, is to enable that shift of perspective and be so curious about where you are, what has happened, what are the circumstances, and what is this golden nugget that it's almost impossible to see on your own. That's something I have to, thank my mentors and my coaches, because they were the only ones who were able to show me. It's like the little kid that digs in a pile of horse shit, and nobody knows why they're digging in there, and there's a little present in the bottom. That's kind of how we are, but that coach or mentor or someone from the outside can really enable us to do this. So I find that that's the entry point.
I feel obliged to ask our guests and our listeners not to go pick in a pile of shit. But that is an interesting metaphor. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes, a bit of an effort to understand that you're digging in the wrong pile, but it's part of the journey.
It is.
Right.
Love a good analogy.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming what I believe that you're talking about is some of the pillars of your victory path system.
Yeah, actually, these are the pillars I developed for myself initially, because these are the ways that here is one thing. Maybe your listeners would resonate with this. When we are in a place of lack, place of questioning ourselves, we are hard on ourselves, we're not good enough, we're shaming ourselves, we're in this relationship with a very dark side in our life. It is almost impossible for us to get out of it just by learning more, take another course, read another book, listen to another podcast, do another workshop. These are external ways that, to be honest, I have found they have their benefits in terms of knowledge, but to take that knowledge and move it into an experience and something that can be utilized, that's where the gold is. And I did a process for myself. I used to think other people have the answers. I used to think, someone else knows exactly what to do. And if only I would be close enough to them and they would give me their secrets, my life will unfold in miraculous ways. And I found that it's all bullshit, because nobody really knows anything about that. This is an entirely personal process. It's a calling for you to learn who you are, how you're wired, question, the assumptions and the narratives and the stories you've created in your life, that sometimes they are your worst prison. And you're fighting so hard to stay in that prison that it is sometimes, I'm in awe of how much effort and energy some people will put into it to keep themselves in that little place, because it's comfortable.
Yeah, it's what's amazing about your story, and I think that this is one of the reasons I wanted you as one of the first guests we were recording with, is that it would have been one thing, if you had just overcome that terrible accident. I mean, that would have been an incredible accomplishment in and of itself, right? But that wasn't it. Behind that, you made I'm sure, gut-wrenching decision to take an action that I can't imagine a lot of people would be able to make without the deepest of soul searching, which is an elective amputation of your right leg below the knee. So tell me how. I mean, I don't know the precise timing, so share that with the audience. But here you are. You're in recovery. The body's mending. You're working on mending your spirit, and then you're facing what feels like another insurmountable obstacle. How do you psych yourself up to stand up yet again and face yet another absolutely gut-wrenching obstacle?
Yeah, this was a tough one, because, at the end of the day, the life-threatening injuries were behind me. I mean, thank God, I'm a relatively, large guy. My body has sustained so much when I was younger that the impact of the injuries didn't create a fully disabled life, right? But I was disabled. After all the life-threatening injuries have healed, a slight injury, I crushed my ankle, and it was supposed to be, okay, we'll just put a few screws in it and, maybe you'll have a limp, but it'll be okay. That was my nemesis, my Achilles heel injury, right? Completely disabled me. I was in excruciating pain 24/7 for 3 months. I didn't sleep, right? I couldn't walk. I was on crutches in a wheelchair. I couldn't be present. The pain occupied 100% of my psyche. I couldn't work. I couldn't be there for my kids. I was a mess of a man, right? That's the place where it was so dark. And that's where, suicide was kind of not to execute on, but it was like, why? Why do I need to suffer so much, right? And going through this process, I thought that, okay, I have to do something, because my doctors always said, oh, you're healing so well and just be grateful for, having the health that you have right now, whatever. I said, no, you don't understand. This is the most debilitating situation I've faced. The broken bones, the inner organs that exploded and got together, that's the body did its work, right? This is something that I can't live with. I am disabled. I'm in pain. And for, I would say, 3 months, I did my research. This is how I approach everything. I'm a great proponent of research, information, and self-education, and become an advocate of your health. You don't just do what one doctor says. I found that most doctors don't really know what they're saying. So you need 4 or 5 of them to understand the bigger picture. And all the solutions that were offered to me were so mediocre, so experimental, so not life-giving, but life-taking, that I started to entertain what seemed to be at the time a very extreme approach. What if I amputate my leg? It's an option. Maybe not any surgeon will say, hey, go amputate your leg, because you still have a leg. It's not that it was life-threatening and they had to chop it off. And to be honest, I did my work. I interviewed amputees. I spent time with amputees to see what their life looks like. What are the consequences? What can happen? The ups and downs. I talked with prosthetists, the people that build prosthetics, and really got ingrained in the world of what could it be. By doing that, I was actually empowered to decide to go with an elective amputation, to give an opportunity, a 50-50 chance of having my life back. And that decision was very, very, very difficult on multiple fronts. But again, if we bring this into the context of, business, for example, sometimes the most difficult decisions are to kind of amputate a part that doesn't work anymore, although you feel it's a part of you, and enabling and trusting that the next phase of it would be better. You don't really know. You're stepping into the unknown. When I was on the in the theater operating room, and I was about to put to sleep, that feeling and surrender of whatever outcome will come out of this, I will have to live with. That was part of, I think, again, a mindset that was built over time to own the consequences. Because after the amputation, I could have been in worse situation than I was prior. So to take ownership of that and to be ready for whatever circumstance, I think was a very powerful place to operate from.
Amazing. It kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the military breaking you down to build yourself up. You were at a middling level with your Achilles that didn't sound like it was going to get better. And so you chose to kind of get what some would say, physically in a worse spot in order to improve your life. That's really inspiring, actually.
Yeah.
Very brave.
And it wasn't like a great experience to begin with. I had complications. I had terrible issues. There's something called phantom limb pain that is caused after an amputation, which is completely devastating. It's the worst pain anybody can feel. It attacks you without warning. It's almost impossible to have a normal life with it. But I went through a process there as well. And I've learned, again, with the best teachers out there, how to rewire the brain. There is a specific approach called mirror therapy, where you rewire. What happens when you amputate? The neurons in your brain keep firing signals to the area of the limb that is missing. And it's an open loop. So it comes back as horrible, horrible pain in a variety of ways. So to cope with this, regular Western medicine just gives you medication to numb the nerves, which is horrible. I had terrible side effects from that, and it didn't work. And the other approach was to actually, how do we approach this from a different place? And that's where I learned about mirror therapy, dedicated a good portion of my life to understand the brain and meditation and what does it mean before I got into it. And then did the process and eliminated the phantom limb pain 100%. That was actually the first point of proof that you can actually rewire your brain. As much as, people talk about it so much scientifically, right? But when you experience it on a physical level, that's it. You know that it is true. It's not science fiction.
So, Erez, you're sitting here with us today, and you've overcome I'm sure, absolutely horrifying and very scary experience of not knowing whether you'll overcome this phantom pain. Talk to me about second guessing yourself, right? So while you're in it, it's not over yet. You're not on the other side. It's very common to second guess your decisions. It's almost impossible in the fog of war, whether it's actual war or business or in your personal life, to know for sure that a decision you've made is the right decision. A lot of times there are reasons to believe that you made the wrong decision, and there's an impulse to try to correct before you even let the dust settle. How do you handle uncertainty, and how do you overcome the tendency to overcorrect or overact as opposed to just letting things play out?
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's to be honest, I don't know if I have an answer. Like this is how it's done.
What did you do for you? What did you do for you?
For me, it comes down to understand that whatever it is I choose to do, it is my responsibility and choice of what the circumstance may be. So to be open-minded to the ups and downs of what the decision can transpire to be, that's kind of the base of where you're at, and self-ownership of the outcome. If I was okay to say to myself, if I amputate my leg, it's going to be worse than before, or I'm okay if it'll be better, that's it. The self-doubt is always there. Questioning is always there. The fear, the distrust, am I doing the right thing? I mean, man, this is a conversation I have to this day, multiple times a day, right? It doesn't even matter. Even if I open the fridge, oh, should I eat, the leftovers of this beautiful birthday cake, or should I, eat, I don't know, a salad, right? It's always there. It never goes away.
I can help you out with that. I just say yes.
There you go. Easy, right?
And actually,
yeah,
I'm sure that leads to this. I'm sorry. Finish your thought on Tal's excellent question.
Yes. So just to answer, not to answer the question, but to reiterate the process that there is no one way to deal with it. It's always going to be there. It's that today it's my best ally. That dark voice, to be honest, if there's one thing that I've learned to be really good at, is to partner with that dark side, that dark voice in my head that always, shame us and blame us, and you're not good enough, and question yourself, and all those things that we all confront, and especially high achievers. Oh my God, entrepreneurs, leaders. This is like, you might as well take a knife and stab you all over the body, right? We do it all the time. But when you develop a relationship with that side of you, and you understand that it is there for a reason, it is there to take you to the next step, then, man, wow, that's a whole different journey.
That's amazing.
So you're out of one second challenge, and then you suffer a heart attack that almost killed you.
Yeah.
Talk about getting up a third time. I mean, this is literally the man who refuses to die, PJ. This man just won't die.
Well, maybe because he doesn't say yes like I do so much at the fridge. But yes, I'm very interested to hear. I'm very interested to hear this.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is, again, you think life is better, right? Because I moved from real estate, which was a very intense environment of work and all of that. And I started to coach, started with the amputee community, then moved more into health and mindset and kind of mental coaching, just because it was a realm I was so connected to and was able to help other people kind of bring it into their own lives. So I've started that coaching, but there was a piece in between, Tal, that when I recovered from the amputation and I overcome the phantom limb pain, again, I put the armor on and I said, here it is. I'm invincible. I'm going to go for it. I decided at the time, and this is from my military service, to train for the longest, toughest off-road race in the world called the Dakar Rally. And I'm going to do it on a motorcycle. Never been done before, right? And I was exposed to off-road on multiple levels through military service and after. And I decided to try and ride a motorcycle after my amputation. Knew I had to do some adjustments for the bike, but it worked. I went back, and for a year and a half, like a machine, I trained for the Dakar Rally. It was an insane journey, but ended up with another terrible accident in one of my pre-qualifying races. And that was the shift where I said, enough is enough. I'm not looking for an outside goal. It was all a macho 100% process to prove myself that I'm still the man, I'm still the commando guy. I probably needed it at the time, but when I was in midair before I crashed during that race, I knew, dude, enough. Like, this is stupid. I have a great family, beautiful life. What am I doing? Enough is enough. Crashed, broke my ribs, shoulder, a mess of myself. Went back home, decided I'm done with the bullshit of the outside. Turned into coaching, did an amazing processes and work with clients and teams and all of that. Thought I was in a brilliant place. No more pursuing crazy exterior goals, not being aggressive with my body, not being aggressive with my mind. Kind of a beautiful middle path. And then, man, a heart attack, right? No warning signs. There was nothing in my health with all these injuries that doctors kind of tested every orifice in my body, came up and said, oh, be careful. There might be a heart attack looming. Wasn't any of that. And I have to tell you, the heart attack, from everything I went through in my entire life, from, you know, military service, immigration, divorce, bankruptcy almost, amputations, all the heart attack was the most difficult one to cope with across the board.
Why is that? Why?
It is you know what it is? It's like an enemy from within, right? It's not a truck. It's not an accident. Oh, I lost control. Something happened, whatever the case. It's something inside of you that attacked you, right? And it breaks you to a billion pieces from the inside, and you don't see it. Because I recovered. Luckily, I was close enough to a hospital, so they saved my life. I have a stent now in one of my arteries. If I was in my home where I'm now, I probably wouldn't be here alive, because there was a window of 90 minutes to actually make this happen. But the effect of this heart attack was absolutely devastating. I wasn't prepared for any of it. It was easier for me to deal with physical injuries, with amputations, with the external part of the resilience journey. But when it comes to the inside, man, that's a whole different ballgame.
Wow.
And yet you overcame. And so, you know, and the essence of this podcast and the stories that I want to tell on this podcast to listeners are about seemingly impossible regenerations, moments where people rise from the ashes like the phoenix. And I think you've done that over and over and over again in your life. And you're doing it with a smile on your face and an attitude that I think represents the best of us. What would be, you know, if there was one North Star or one critical life lesson or value that you'd urge our listeners to walk away from this podcast with, what would it be?
No, we've been given a gift, and you only have one chance, as far as I'm concerned, to experience that gift in this lifetime. And it doesn't matter what happens to you, your background, your ethnic background, your geographical background, your business background, family, it doesn't matter. None of it has any consequences on executing on this gift. I believe wholeheartedly that every person has a very unique genius that is called upon to do something with this lifetime. It doesn't have to be life-changing. It doesn't have to impact billions of people or, you know, advance humanity on multiple levels. Sometimes we think that this is like, oh, if I'm not doing this, I'm not doing anything. It could be just, for crying out loud, be a good parent, right? Be a good spouse, be a good neighbor, like be a human, for crying out loud, right? If you just do that, that's an expression of that gift. So I feel that as terrible as these lessons have been for me on the exterior side of them, they have proven again and again and again that if you have a bigger cause, a bigger calling to stay alive, despite the circumstances you're under, because there is something there that you are about to learn, and then your job is to pay it forward. This is what I do today. My job is to pay forward the lessons I have learned. I have not discovered anything unique. I have not invented anything unique. There is nothing new under the sun anyways, when you really look at it. But what I was called to do was to distill these lessons and package them in a way that people that can relate to this journey can actually assimilate, bring into their lives, and then take what they have learned and pass it on. So it's just this continuous pay it forward cycle that when you subscribe to this club, you'll overcome everything in your life, because it's not just about you. And if you live in a world that it's about you only, that's a problem. That's where all tactics about resiliency and, you know, grit and willpower and all of that, that's never going to work. It's just not good enough.
Wow. That's awesome.
In a nutshell.
That really is. A few takeaways from this. A, never going to complain about hangnail ever again. B, the fact that I think you said it very eloquently. I always thought that the biggest challenge for a person, whether it's an entrepreneur, a business person, someone, you know, a spouse, a brother, a son, whatever, the biggest challenge is to figure out how can you leave a mark on the world without leaving a bruise, right? And I think that with your clear-sightedness and this intentionality that you have in regards to paying it forward, in regards to living in the moment and being aware of not only the external customers, but also your own internal customer is, I think it's very inspiring. And I just loved it. Loved it.
Yeah, thank you. That's Erez Avramov. I tell you, as I think about the most inspiring stories I've heard in my life, they almost always revolve around recognizing that at the core of it all is choosing to be your best self, which is we often fight and scratch and claw. And then at the end, when it's all said and done, we realize, you know what the best path is to being successful? Being the best version of ourselves. And we know what that best version of ourselves looks like. It's our least selfish, most integrated, most conscientious, most balanced version of ourselves. And in moments of crisis, that version of ourselves is not always accessible. We usually turn to some learned behaviors that are second nature, but not necessarily representative of who we are at our best. Conscientiously choosing to be our best in moments like that sounds like the thesis that you'd recommend our listeners take away.
Completely. And I always say you always have a choice. The choice is always in your hands. I don't care the circumstances. You do have a choice. Even if you don't see it at the moment, there is a choice there. And I do agree with you, Tal. It's a lot easier to numb ourselves, you know, do some, let's call them addictive, not supportive type of actions, you know, be that you numb yourself through alcohol or drugs or TV or porn or workaholism. There are so many paths, over-exercising. There are so many paths that we can choose to numb the pain and try and not confront it, that at the end, you just make it worse. So if I was to share with someone how to shortcut the period of, you know, for me, it was a decade of near-death experiences and going through all this craziness. And if I would say, you know, you don't need to go through all of this, right? There is a different way to approach this. It is to really turn the lens on life through a curiosity mindset and just ask the questions that for so many of us, because we don't have the answers, we don't even want to ask them, or we don't know what to ask, right? And by just creating that environment in your life, you open a channel that can invite something unbelievable into your life. And that's the gift today, that I am so privileged to enable other people to open that portal for them. And they do the work, right? It's not that I do anything like, oh my God, it's really just enabling them to be in a container of seeing who they are and standing up for who they are and acting from there. And just like you said, Tal, it's really to be the best version of ourselves. And it's what that version is for us. It doesn't mean that there is a version that everybody has to aspire to. Not at all. Very personal.
That's awesome. But for our listeners, what is coming up next for you? Do you have anything that you wanted to share in regards to, you know, how they get in touch with you? How do they connect with you, get a part of your program? Please share that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So for me, I don't advertise. Really, my coaching is a very, very high-end, bespoke level, customized program. It's only been referral based my entire career in this industry now. I am very, very particular in choosing clients these days. I have made some mistakes in the past where I said yes to people that were not ready. Not that they didn't have the potential to transform, but they were not ready. There was more work for them to do on their own. So there's a very elaborate selection process. It's almost like the way I was selected to be a Commando soldier. I do employ a lot of that these days, because here is what I do, why I do what I do. My job, my sole job here, is to enable great people that are in a leadership position and have already been chosen or chose to be at the precipice of creating impact for hundreds, thousands, millions of people because of the work that they do. But they are the bottleneck. That leader is always the bottleneck. So my job is to come in and enable them to become that unbelievable version of themselves that can actually enable other people to follow them and get to the targets that they're after.
Erez Avramov, a business strategist, a keynote speaker, leadership coach, resiliency expert, the man who refused to die, and just a fascinating human being. It's been an utter pleasure. I'm so grateful that you took the time, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it and learn a lot from it.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
And PJ, it was a great conversation. I love the interaction, and just love what you guys are doing. I think this is so important to take the conversation sometimes outside the realm of, you know, strategies and tactics and how-tos and things like that, and just understand, man, we're humans. We're just on a path trying to do the best we can, and sometimes we get lost, but there's always a way out.
It's been an honor. Thank you for letting me be a little fly on the wall, or a large fly on the wall.
Thank you, guys.
PJ. Thank you so much, Erez. Have a wonderful day.